the year of Superman. And you must be wondering why it is the year of Superman. And I'm glad you asked. We will tell you. I'll let each of these people introduce themselves. Otherwise, we'll be here an hour. They all have a bio like this long. So I'll just read the entire panel. Starting with Keith, because he doesn't like to be in the hot seat, which means I like to put him in the hot seat because I'm a little jerk that way.
Every time.
Every single time.
Is this like the third time?
It is the third time, yeah.
Okay.
I'm consistent.
All right. Hi, I'm Keith Williams. I'm an artist inker, basically. Worked in comic books for over 40 years. Worked for Marvel, DC, Dark Horse, Valiant, pick one, King Features. And worked as a Romita Raider, art correction person at Marvel. Worked as an assistant editor for the Spider-Man books. Worked with John Byrne, starting on Alpha Flight, moving on to the Hulk, and then ended up on Action Comics with him, with Superman. So, and a bunch of other things. I'm going to move on.
Okay. My name is Jamal Igle. Like Keith, I've done a little bit of everything in this business. I guess the reason why I'm here is because I worked on Supergirl for 2 years, as well as Action Comics, Superman, and War of the Supermen while I was at DC. And I did an Infinite Frontier story with John Kent, Superman, a couple of years ago as well. So
I love how you delivered that. I guess why I'm here is because I drew everything Superman for like 20 years.
Not like this guy.
Oh, no.
I'm Rags Morales, and for the purposes of this panel, I did New 52 Superman on Action Comics.
Which is a really nice, we have 3 decades of Superman, legends, including 2 bookend reboots. Right, 86 and 2011.
Yeah.
So that's I love that symmetry.
I'm feeling pretty old.
It's been a minute. Huh?
Yeah.
I feel young until I talk to a 19-year-old, and then I realize we're all like Joe Biden's age. Sure. It's all the same. I'm Roy Schwartz. I'm the co-producer of Cosmicon. I'm a comic book historian and critic. I was a former longtime CNN contributor. And I am, I guess, mostly famous for the book, Is Superman Circumcised? The Complete Jewish History of the World's Greatest Hero, which is a history of the character from A to Z from the Jewish cultural perspective. Hashtag shameless plug. And we are here to talk about Superman, who is, of course, everybody's favorite superhero here, I'm assuming, because this is the year of Superman. DC has the Summer of Superman promotional going on.
Right.
There's the first new ongoing Superman series coming out since The Man of Steel, done with Simonson and Bogdanov. And we have a little movie coming out.
Yeah, just a small
little movie, right?
Yeah.
And I'm happy to share that my connection to it, I'm no practitioner of the art like these guys, is that I am working on the marketing campaign for the movie. So I have that inside scoop. Yeah. So I know it's going to happen, guys.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm going to talk to you later.
Yeah. I did a podcast a few months ago, and I let slip that crypto is in the movie long before they announced. I'm amazed a sniper hasn't taken me out yet. That was me.
I think it was I think between you and Wade, it was sort of like a 2 for like.
Wade also knows everything.
Yeah.
He knows the story. He got the story walkthrough, the production design. I guess more than I probably. And here we are. So I want to go chronologically and start with Keith, which also lets me put him in the hot seat again, right?
Oh,
consistent. Wow. Could you tell me about us? How did you get roped into the big reboot, and how it was working with Byrne, and just all the fun stories from that?
I got to say, I think what happened was, getting involved with Byrne, that was because of Mark Grunwald. And Byrne was looking for somebody to do backgrounds for his books. At the time it was Alpha Flight. And he asked me if I was interested. And I was doing like a bunch of other stuff at the time, but I said, John Byrne? Rock 2000? All the cool stuff. I mean, I love John's stuff. I said, yeah, sure, absolutely. So I ended up working with him. He is an absolutely incredible person. He introduced me actually in the first book that I worked with him on, which was the Alpha Flight one with I think it was Magician Woman or something like that. That was on the cover. I can't remember what her name was. Talisman. Talisman. She was on the cover of that one, and it said introducing background inker Keith Williams. And nobody ever introduces a background inker. We're usually silent. We're in the background, which is why it's called background. And we just do our work, and that's that. John was very nice to do that. So he had me on Alpha Flight, moved me on to the Hulk when he moved on, and worked with him on that. And then once he left Marvel and went over to DC, after a little bit of time during the Superman reboot, he asked me if I was interested in working with him on Action Comics. And I said, of course. And he, I started working with him on that, and he put my name on the front of the cover. This was all great advertising for me.
Who was the editor of that?
The editor at that time, was that Mike?
I think that was Carlin.
It was Mike Collins.
So it was Carlin or Byrne who put your name on the front?
Byrne put my name on the front. Byrne put my name on the front. Byrne also said that if there's any royalties that come in, that I get part of it. And I don't know what I did to this guy. He's so nice to me, but. Yeah, so I was there working with him on. Oh, sorry, I'm banging on tape.
Yeah.
I ended up working on Superman. I actually also did a background job on an issue of Superman with Terry Austin as the foreground inker, and I did the backgrounds, trying to imitate Terry Austin's style. And that's what background inker is supposed to do. So yeah,
That sounds amazing. And the scoop is that John Byrne is such a mensch.
He's an incredible guy, even though everybody thinks of him as this crabby person. But with me and I guess with some other people, he's always great.
That's always
never had a problem. It was very, very nice. We actually went to visit him during the summer. He had these volleyball games with Marvel and DC, stuff like that, and we would all be hanging out. Yeah, it was a dream.
And you worked. Who was the writer during your run at Supergirl?
That was Sterling Gates.
Sterling Gates,
So it was Sterling, and then I also worked with Greg Rucka and James Robinson when they were doing World of New Krypton and War of the Supermen. So it was interesting to see.
Say more.
Well, every writer has their own way of telling a story, and every writer is looking for different things from different projects. Sterling and I, the way that I came into working on Supergirl was I was working on a miniseries with Dan Jurgens called Tangent Superman's Reign.
I remember that well.
Yeah, and I had kind of settled into the idea that was going to be the gig because I was doing the main part of each issue, which was 17 pages, and I figured that was like a good, I had a good way for me to kind of it was good money, and I basically the editor at the time, who was Matt Idelson. And, when he offered that to me and told me what it was 17-page things, and they originally only wanted me to do 4 issues, and it was I might as well just do the whole thing. This is a 12-issue series. It's only 17 pages per issue. I might as well do it. I'm at a store signing in Chicago at Graham Cracker's Comics, and I get this call from Matt, and he's like, we need an artist for Supergirl. Would you be interested? We've got this new writer named Sterling Gates, which at first I was just like, no, Sterling Gates? No, that can't possibly be his real name. But it is. It is on his birth certificate. But it was Sterling had at that point, he had been working with Jeff Johns, but he started doing some small things for Green Lantern, and they sent me Sterling's first script, which I absolutely loved. And I said, I actually absolutely have to be involved. But Sterling, over the 2 years that Sterling and I worked together, we formed this sort of symbiotic relationship. You create, when you work with a writer long enough, you start to create a shorthand with each other. And that can take different forms, but not every writer is like that. So working with James Robinson versus working with Sterling, who had been much more comfortable at that point working with, and it was, and same thing, like James is very methodical in the way that he writes his scripts. Sterling was a little bit looser, so there was a little bit more room to play where, some writers want very precise camera movements. Other writers will just give you a plot and let you go and have you figure out what the storytelling is for something. So it was that, but then we also had a situation where you're doing a crossover. And because you're part of a crossover, you're waiting for pages that are running late, pages that are running early, last minute changes in scripts. What was supposed to be a 6-issue monthly crossover has now been condensed into a 4-issue weekly crossover. So,
it's funny, as you say this, he's like laughing, and he has like PTSD flashes.
The mask, global mask.
Yeah.
Holy cow. Yeah.
Just playing poker.
Yeah, exactly.
I can see that.
So it's having all of those challenges and then trying to maintain some semblance of quality and some sense of self, not get like completely lost in the work and having to do the work and having to hit deadlines and everything else. So it was an interesting time. It was a very challenging time for me. Wow.
Sounds like an adventure, but it sounds like you had fun. You're smiling as you tell these whole
I had fun. I mean, ultimately, I got to do the one thing that I said that I would do before I left DC full time, and I got to draw Superman. So, that's what I wanted. Like, I got to do, 713 and 714, the last 2 issues before Rags and Company took over. And then I got to do,
right?
Yeah, and I got to do Action Comics 900. So, yeah.
It's a nice feather in the cap.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same question about how you got roped into the reboot and your adventures or misadventures there.
All right. DC Comics is very good at keeping things close to the vest. When they don't want something to come out, they don't even tell the people they want on their product. At the time, I was under exclusive contract with DC Comics. And in that exclusive contract, I had a $65,000 base of work provided. That means they had to provide a minimum of $65,000 worth of work. Obviously, that's without royalties.
Right.
It's just flat work based on my page rate. And the worst thing you can do to an artist, especially if they're on a contract, is to not answer their calls. The only vacations they seem to take is when we're in between projects, generally 3 days. And panic sets. Am I not good enough anymore? Did I say something wrong? Did they give it to somebody else? All the stupid little questions that pop in your head. But really, the sausage is being made. You just waiting for your slice. So at the particular time of this project, I was waiting to hear something, reminding my editor. I forgot who my editor was, but it wasn't Matt. He was coming in.
No, was it Eddie?
No, it wasn't Whipper.
Oh, okay.
No. Well, here I am in between projects, so I didn't even have an editor, at this point. So I'm begging DC. I've got bills. I've got nothing on the table. Could you please give me something? And they threw a bunch of covers at me. That's where I did that one Flashpoint Captain. I would say Captain Marvel Shazam.
Yeah.
With the kids in the front.
It'll always be Captain Marvel to me. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Same here.
Thank you. And so I did that cover. I did a tripod. This is not a tripod. This is a
A box?
This is a triangle. Shut up. Tripods are shaped like triangles.
This is the tripod.
And it's shaped like a triangle. A triangle.
Man's got a point. Okay. Continue.
Yes, yes.
If you want to know how to draw a tripod,
Okay.
Oh, good Lord.
start with a triangle. I did a tripod cover of it's like pyramid, where you have like one piece of the whole picture at the top, and then you have two on the bottom. Okay, like a triptych. And this particular one was something that I don't think ever saw the light of day, but it was Sinestro descending down on the Green Lantern Corps, like God or Jesus or whatever. I don't think I ever saw the light of day. In fact, I was going through a bunch of artwork, and I was like, oh, damn, there it is. It's a pretty good cover. I don't know why they didn't use it. They just wanted to keep me busy.
Right.
Long story short. So finally, I made enough money so that I could pay my bills. And now I'm thinking, well, nothing's going on. They can always call me. Let me go up and see my kids. I have children that lived in New Hampshire, and I wanted to visit them. And we found a great little hotel that could take our dog as well. So off we went. But before I left, like just like the day before I was about to leave, I get a call from Matt Idelson. And he says, Rags, we're doing something called the New 52, where we're rebooting the entire iconography of the book and just getting rid of the continuity and starting all over again, which I thought was wonderful. Wonderful, even though most fans hate it. But I thought it was great because we need fresh blood. And usually fresh blood means bringing it back to basics, okay? Now, prior to this phone call and prior to everything I just told you, I had dinner with Jeff Johns. And he and I were batting around ideas because I really wanted to do Captain Marvel. I love Captain Marvel. He was going to do the whole thing. He eventually went with Gary Frank. Great choice, but he still sucks. And I was very excited about the possibility of working on this project. And so when I got the call, I kept thinking I was going to be Captain Marvel with Jeff Johns. But instead, I got Superman New 52 with Grant Morrison. And the first thought was, but I wanted Captain Marvel. Then it dawned on me that I'm working with Grant effing, I'm saying this now for the kids, Morrison. And then I got excited. Then I went on Facebook and all I said was, boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. I just left it at that. But I still had plans. I still had reservations. I had to see my kids. And I says, all right, listen, do I have time to go see my kids? I'm going to take a week. I want to go to New Hampshire. He goes, yeah, go ahead. Yeah, do that. I says, great. That's what I'm going to do. Now, a lot of talk was about my lateness on this project. Let me explain to you how sometimes how comic books can happen as an artist in this industry.
Can I just interrupt for a second? Because
Don't you dare. I'm on a
no.
roll.
I'm just going to say you started with the name Grant Morrison, so and everything that you're about to say is absolutely 100% true.
I get that a lot. What's it like to work with Grant Morrison? Well, sit down. Let me tell you a story. See, you interrupted my flow.
I'm sorry.
You had a week. You went to New Hampshire.
Thank you.
go.
You're paying attention. I appreciate that. Okay, so I said, do I have a week? He says, yes. Okay, and that was about it. And then I went off, saw my kids, had a great time, and I had a wonderful, time, just conceiving of what it would be like to work with Grant Morrison on Superman and starting over fresh. Oh my God. So I get back. Now, what I didn't know about Grant Morrison and an Alan Moore or, you know what I'm saying, is that if they want 38 pages, they'll get 38 pages. Or 30 pages, which is a book is typically 22 pages. Yeah. Sometimes they're 24, sometimes they're 20, but mostly they're 22. And so here I am. I lost a week because I was seeing my kids. I come back to a 38-page story. And the inker of choice, only because I knew we were up against it, was Rick Bryant, who lived blocks away from where I lived, and he had a scanner. So that made it a lot easier, because at the time we were still working with FedEx, and this is when scanners were just coming in, and so because he had that technology and I did not, I thought it would be helpful to work with somebody who had that technology. But unfortunately, and this is no disrespect to the man, he has a wonderful line, but some people are inkers because they can't draw. And I always associate it with like a pitching, like baseball. Pencilers are starters. We have 5 pitches, minimum of 4. Inkers are relievers, and they have maybe 3. Some only 1 or 2. There's one now. And he had a wonderful line. He had a great line. He also had a great sense of changing, styles to match the artist. But when you're working with Grant Morrison, and this is another Grantism, you don't know where it's going. Oftentimes, we're given a script. And in that script is a lot of superfluous information. And the whole point of it is so that when you draw that scene, you have enough information to go ahead and just own it. You pull out what you think is good, what's going to work, and all of that. That's not Grant Morrison. That's not Grant Morrison. Grant Morrison writes stuff that 10 months down the line comes back. So if you have a dog peeing on a spittoon, that could be Mr. Discipline. You don't know. You just don't know. So you draw everything. So here I am working with a guy with great technological advantages, but he's also has to be given everything. So I have to draw the whole. I just can't go ahead and just draw a simplistic hand and have him flesh it out for me, or even throw it in shadow. He has to follow the lines. So 38 pages. A week later, Grant Morrison's writing. An inker who has to follow every line, and here I am busting my ass to get this thing in. At the same time, make sure everybody's covered. Okay, because now it's on me. And so that, in and of itself, plus subsequent issues of being 30 pages, so forth and so on, slowed me down to where I get an email from Rob Johnson, Bleeding Cool.
Rich Johnson.
Rich Johnson. Bleeding Cool. Rich Johnson, if I ever see you again, I'm going to break your glasses in front of your wife. Because he got an email, because he had a source that chirped in his ear that I was off the book for being late. And I explained to him, because at this time, Gene Ha had come in to actually do like some of the little bits in the front, a prologue. And I said, no, I am absolutely not off the project. We ran into some delays, without being specific. And I said, I'm still on a project, and that, Gene's just in to give me a little, pick me up, just kind of give me back a week, and I can go ahead and keep going. And he was polite and very nice. And he said, oh, well, thank you for getting back to me. And I'm going to write this article now. And then he went on to write the article he wanted to write, because that's yellow journalism. And that's what he wanted. He didn't want the truth. And so my response to that article was actually showing the tops of the pages with my name, Action Comics, and the numbers. So I'm working beyond the point you think I'm off of it. And of course, the speculation is, well, we're not seeing anything. Well, of course you're not seeing anything. What the hell? That's stupid. I'm not going to give you what I'm working on. You're not supposed to see it yet. It's not done. But the speculation, eventually I won. So when I got to London one day for a con, and Rich wanted me to give him stories, I says, oh, Rich, I don't know if I should give you anything. I told him, I says, you're disrespecting me. You know, you led me one way, you took me another. And it was for your benefit at my expense, and I'm not giving you anything. And he said, oh, well, you know how it is, Jack. I was a young writer then. It was a fucking year ago, man. What the hell are you talking about? Sorry, kids. So that was my introduction to this particular run of Superman. I've done some things. I've done Superman, Batman before. I did work with Grant Rucka on some Superman stuff. Smattering here, smattering there. Enough of a smattering that they gave me this job. They thought I could do a good job. And so yeah, that was the beginning. And then subsequently, it was that kind of pressure to work with Grant to do the storylines and work with an inker and all that. Eventually, took its toll. No matter how hard I tried to keep up with it. And at some point, some of us get old. And you can't hold on to those tight deadlines. You can't do 24-hour days.
I know. It's like I wasn't exactly sure how far.
I was going right down the line. Notice I started here and over here. But when you get older, you know that tight deadline with that kind of workload was just
it's
not
a grind.
anymore. It is a grind. I mean, the stories are true. 24-hour days are common.
Oh yeah.
48-hour days are rare, but you've heard of a few. I did 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
You know.
I once calculated that I'd slept for about 4 hours a night for 7 years.
Yeah. Yeah, that's where I am now. That's only because I'm broke.
Try doing a comic strip.
Yeah.
I'll take it. So the next question is going to be, what's it like to work with Grant
Well, you just
Morrison?
answered like 18 questions. And I have more for you, but I want to circle. So,
All right, continue.
and I want to put my good friend in the hot seat again because I just enjoy seeing him, you know.
Worm.
So, you were there on the ground floor of the first ever company-wide reboot. So it was really uncharted waters. And you worked on, everything was reconceived from the ground up.
Oh yeah.
So you were more than just like a fly on the wall. You were part of that whole process. So I want to hear your battle stories.
Well, I'll tell you, it was actually more of a fly on the wall. When you're an inker, you don't get to hobnob with the writers or the editors.
Let me tell you about Hobnob.
Well,
that one's coming.
Most of the time. Oh, but when I did have to hobnob, and that's another Lobo Mass story. But because heaven forbid everything falls onto the inker if the penciler or the writer doesn't get their stuff together.
Somewhere there's a colorist saying, screw you.
And then there's the colors, yes. But inkers get hit pretty bad. But on working with John on action comics, there was usually no problem. He would just send me the artwork, or DC would send me the artwork, and I would just start, working on it. Because John was doing the figure work, so he was doing all the Superman, Lois, anybody, that was important. Anybody that was important, I could sometimes get a chance to, mess around with. I try to say, hey, John, can I play with that character there? Yeah, sure, go ahead, kid. and you could put the blacks in also, and all that. So yeah, it was very exciting times. So I was basically given the stuff, getting it done as fast as I can, and getting it back out. Sometimes it would be like 5 pages in one day. You just have to move. The day would go by, you'd be into the next morning. I think I was living in Boston at the time too, and I would be just sitting in my room, just continuously working through the whole day, night. Maybe I might have gotten something to eat, but that would be me working on with John on the book. So I was far enough away so that I wasn't going into the office every day. I wasn't always seeing people. I wasn't talking to a lot of people. It was like how I started at Marvel when I was doing backgrounds there. I was like just basically getting stuff from Federal Express. Do the stuff. I would either I'd send it back out Federal Express, or I would actually go up to the offices. And going up to the offices is a good advantage. It's a good thing if you're living in the city.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically what I would be doing. I did mess up one time on an Action comic, and it was the Superman Superboy meeting, and this is when I was in Boston. We just got a dog, a little Lhasa Apso named Ashley, and what usually would happen with me is that I would go and pick up my wife, who worked at the VA hospital at that time in Boston, and I would go there every afternoon, pick her up, bring her back home. Okay. So now we have a dog. So I had something extra to pay attention to. I had finished, I think I totally finished that Action book. And I was going to take it to, I was going to go and take it to the post office to send it out. It was either that or, no, it was Federal Express. I was going to go to Logan Airport. I was going to go and do all that. But what happened was, since I had a dog now and I had to take it with me, it was a little puppy. We had a car. I'd put the puppy in the car. I'd get into the car and we'd drive off. What I forgot was that the artwork was sitting on the top of the roof of the car. And I drove off.
And Superman took flight.
Superman took flight. So,
Mitt Romney did.
holy cow! I'll tell you, man, that was such a. I got to the hospital and I was, waiting to pick up my wife, and who wasn't my wife at that time, but I didn't suddenly remember it. Oh, where are the pages? And I looked at the roof of the car. I was on the roof of the car.
They're all over I-95.
It's gone. I left my wife at the hospital. She didn't come down yet. I left. I started driving back, going the exact same way that I went to try and find these pages.
Wow.
And they all flew off in the first half mile.
Yeah. And I also know that they're still around because I've seen them floating around online, being sold here and there and stuff like that. But at the time, that didn't help me.
Right.
That was years later. So I had to go and call DC.
How did they take it?
Oh, I don't. You see, that was one of the horrifying advantages of living in Boston and not being at the offices at the time, because I could almost see them in my head sharpening knives and calling hit people to come and get me.
That's why Carlin told me to Xerox your pages before you said it.
You see, yes.
Got it.
It's smart.
Yeah. But everybody was actually very nice, and John actually he redid the pages on vellum and sent them to me to redo the backgrounds on.
That's nice.
Oh, this is Superman Superboy. So take a look at that.
We will.
This is, so that's the story behind that one. But that's my Superman horror story.
And they're always very nice to you before they make you walk the plank. That's how they get you there.
I'm telling you, it was amazing that they didn't fire me on the spot, and John was very incredibly good about it, because I ended up working on She-Hulk with him later. Okay, so I guess something was up there.
Where are the pages?
Yeah.
Okay. Jesus Christ. I was even thinking that maybe they thought that I kept them and did something with. I have no. It was such a moment.
That's crazy.
but I never did that again. I learned my lesson.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
There's an old Army saying that safety instructions are written in blood.
Oh man, yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
I like that.
It's a good one, right?
Yeah, that's excellent.
I agree.
Yeah. So, Jamal, you did a lot of Superman work,
Yep.
but you also did Supergirl, and actually I'm interested in the Supergirl
Mhm.
because she comes with her own challenges.
Yep.
She's her own character, and in many ways, because of her sort of relation to Superman, she can be even more challenging to do.
Right.
So, can you just talk about that?
Well, yeah. At that point, this was after Jeff Loeb and Michael Turner had rebooted the character, and they had started the ongoing series, and it had been going I came in on issue 34. So when I got hired, I think it was probably like their issue 32 had just come out, and I had sort of like checked out of Supergirl, at least like that version of the character at that point, because a lot of what I had seen really, frankly, didn't match up to my sensibilities about the character. It has nothing to do with any of the creators working on the book, but I know there was a very specific mandate for the character that was being set by both Dan DiDio and Eddie Berganza, who was the editor on the book at the time. So when Sterling and I came in on the book, I had a meeting with Matt Idelson. I had flew back to New York, went into the offices, and the first thing Matt says to me is, "I never want to see Supergirl's panties again." Which I agreed. And then the second thing he said to me was, "Don't read any of the previous issues," which I ignored because I wanted to see what had been going on. So I got the trade paperback of the previous like story arc with Reactron. So there was a day where I'm flipping through the trade paperback for the previous run, and my mother was there, and my nieces were there, and I'm a new father at this point. My kid, the kid was not even a year old at that point, and I showed the trade paperback to my mother, who looked at it and said, "She looks like a hooker," or the way that she was being drawn. So I sort of said it in my own mind that I wanted to present Supergirl in a more realistic fashion, or at least how my approach to drawing the character. Because it seemed like with the artists previously, the half shirt kept creeping up higher and higher underneath the boobs. The skirt became tinier and tinier. And, my being such a huge Superman fan in general, like that crest, that idea of Superman means something. And one of the great things about that was Sterling, very much, even separately before we even really had a chance to talk about it, was kind of thinking in the same direction. So our mandate became trying to present a certain idea of Kara as a character as being just a normal girl who woke up one day and suddenly had these superpowers. Her cousin is the world's greatest superhero, and everybody expects her to be part of the family business. So she, as a character, was just kind of trying to find her own path, trying to find her own way, and trying to be somewhat normal. And then during our run, we gave her another secret identity, because she's had secret identities before. But we made her a niece of Lana Lang. She had an internship at the Daily Planet. We were trying to do something different with the character, and then everything got wrapped in with the new Krypton storyline. So we ended up having to sort of dovetail at certain points away from what we wanted to do with the character, and in much more of a character exploration. We did manage to do it. I think we did some very, very emotional and very personal stories with Kara, both finding her way on Earth, but this rekindled relationship that she had with her mother at the time, dealing with the death of her father, having to deal with the idea that the U.S. military is trying to destroy her and her people, but also embracing what it means to be, Supergirl, and what it means to be Superman's cousin, and what that means to the world. So visually, for me, it was trying to present her not demure. It was never about being demure, but trying to find ways to present her visually that were, not exploitive. Not everybody agreed with us. Not everybody at DC agreed with us. Dan DiDio very specifically said that we were writing her like a 40-year-old woman.
Oh, wow.
Women fans absolutely agreed with us. They liked what we were doing, and we were more encouraged by that idea than anything that I think DC was trying to, push us to do. We were able to kind of, and luckily we had Matt on our side to kind of like help us like fight the good fight against editorial, or upper editorial, in that manner. So.
That was, I couldn't have asked for a better answer to that question. That was great. Rags, I have a twofer. The bigger one is about the New 52, but I have a selfish question because I wrote this book. And in this book, is Superman Circumcised available anywhere fine books are sold? I talk about the New 52, and I talk about, at the end, I think it was the second issue of Action Comics, there's a little Q&A or a little interview with you and Grant, and you talk about how Grant talks about how he wanted to bring Superman closer back to his Moses origins. And then you talk from the artist's perspective how you try to make the rocket ship more like the basket of bulrushes. So, you see, I catch it. So I would like to know if you have anything more to say about that. I'd be fascinated before I go to my real question.
Well, first, let me say that no editor should ever say never read the previous issues. And this is how you know most editors don't know anything about art. Sorry, but it's true. Because they assume that we're just going to mimic the last guy, as if we don't have our own thoughts, concerns. Same thing happened with Wonder Woman. I got sick and tired of looking at her as Wonder Chick. I wanted her to bring the woman out of Wonder Woman. I wanted her to be dominant. I wanted her to be attractive, but not sexualized. You can do that.
Right.
There's a difference between nudity and porn. Okay? So I wanted to go more toward the respectful point of view of appreciating somebody for their beauty, inward and outward. And I hated to hear that little part of just don't watch what the other guys, as if we were going to go ahead and draw panties and head highlights, head beams, It's ridiculous. And listen, we get away with certain things in this industry. And part of it is trying to be marketable, sometimes at the cost of our own dignity.
Right. But it has to be appropriate to the character.
But it has to be appropriate to the character. So when you handle a Supergirl, you handle it gently. A Wonder Woman is handled gently. Okay? Vampiro is another story. But to get back to the thing, and Grant as wrote that particular version of Superman from the ground up. Now, the three things that came to me, and it started with a conversation with Matt Otteson. He said, Grant wants Superman to be jeans and a t-shirt. We don't know what that looks like. You had Connor Kent. What do you mean you don't know what it looks like? Well, what they're saying is that we don't know what it looks like when you do it. That's usually what it means. And I thought I was pretty good at drawing clothing. To me, I think one of my strengths is naturalization. One of my weaknesses is doing Jack Kirby style posing. Okay, I'm more of an illustrator. But I did it. And the reason, and the first thing that popped in my head when they said Superman in jeans and a t-shirt, the first thing that popped after Connor Kent, the first thing that popped in my head was another icon of our media, and that's Lil Abner.
Yeah.
So Lil Abner popped in, and looking at Lil Abner's boots, and knowing that Superman was the son of a farmer, an adopted son of a farmer. I started thinking, well, maybe those boots should look more like what Little Abner would wear, or in this particular case, hand-me-down boots from a very poor family. So that's why it looks like it's more like Grapes of Wrath. And when I saw some subsequent versions with the knobby, soles, I said, you're missing the point.
Right.
I did it specifically for a reason. And it was my idea to break the shoes when he launched off into space. Because now he's Superman. He's no longer Clark Kent, the farm boy, even though he is. Visually, he's Superman taking off. Now he's going into the world of tomorrow where he belongs. Okay? So the other two, besides Little Abner, was Max Fleischer cartoons.
Yeah.
Love those old Max Fleischer cartoons. I love that he got hurt. I love that when he landed on the building, he would collapse and then bounce off of it. That squash and stretch
Right.
that animators use. I love the fact that he wasn't flying. And in fact, the pose I used for the first cover was him that he did for the first, I believe, 10 years of his existence before he learned to fly. He was bounding. So that was a pose of bounding that Joe Shuster had been using forever. And so that was and of course I put the cop cars in. It said 1938, the year that he came in, 1938. They're on top of the hoods or the roofs of the cop cars. So it was all like back to basics.
Right.
We're back to basics with this. And then the third one, the third influence was pre-leather Elvis Presley. Hound dog Elvis Presley. That's young, vibrant, with the pompadour. When he's
the
catching
hair,
the bullet. In fact, I was literally thinking, when he was catching the bullet in that one scene, I think it was the first issue. Catches the bullet, he goes, "Thank you very much." That's exactly what was in my head, because I had Elvis, I had Max Fleischer, and I had Lil Abner in there. Now, this goes back to a conversation that I had with my brother-in-law about the Jewish angle. And not being Jewish, I didn't know that El was another word for God. And he explained it to me because, my brother-in-law is very smart, and his brother is also very brilliant, and they were having a conversation. He related to me. And I was like, oh, crap. Now I started thinking of the very beginnings of Superman coming from a planet, going someplace safe where he's going to be adopted. I'm thinking, it's Moses.
Mm-hmm.
Of course. So I made it a point to make his ship, and it's on the cover of issue 5, have the shape and form of the basket going down the line.
So that idea came from you, not from Morrison.
It didn't come from Morrison, no. It came from my conversation with my brother-in-law. Yeah. So that's the long and short of that.
Nice.
It's like our third scoop of today. That's very cool.
Yeah.
And then the real question that I had about the New 52 is Superman was relaunched by two creative teams. One is sort of a full team and one of George Perez, and then it's you and Grant. And even though the relaunch was simultaneous, it was very different and discordant at times. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that.
DC Comics has a habit of keeping everything close to the vest. So while they're having the little meetings with the little writing teams and the little go squad, by the time we get it, we have no idea what the rest of the books look like. In this case, New 52 being a relaunch of the entire universe, at least for the 52 issues that we were doing. It would have been really beneficial had we as artists knew specifically what the rest of the books were doing, where they're going, so that we know how to lean one way or the other. You see, they forget that artists are the director of these movies. There's the screenwriter, we're the director. We set the stage, we set the lighting, we do the costumes, okay? We establish settings, okay? We help with the pace. And if we don't know where we're going or where they're gonna go over there, we're left just drifting and doing what the writer says. And not every writer is very good at explaining everything. In fact, one editor once told me the only two people who know anything about the books that they're on, as far as continuity is concerned, are the penciler and the colorist. because the inker follows, the letterer follows, and the writer forgets what he wrote 4 issues ago. So that when you try to do the same scene, you go, oh, wait a minute now, hold on, let me get you on the phone. Let's talk about this because we did it here, this way. And then he thinks, oh, all right, I'll fix it in the dialogue.
Wow.
It's like that. So, I don't know, did I answer the question?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have 20 more questions for each of you, but the panel is running short. I want to give the audience a chance to talk. But that's always, I was talking, we did the Spider-Man panel before this, and we mentioned that the sign of a good panel is that you feel like you barely even scratched the surface.
Yeah.
That's always a good thing.
Yeah.
I think that there's room for interpretation, but in general, I feel like there are certain characters where the core characteristics of those characters have to be maintained. Everything else is surface on top of that. But there's a core to characters like Superman, the Lone Ranger, and Sherlock Holmes, and Dracula. You need to maintain who that character is culturally. I'm not a big fan of the Zack Snyder movies in general. So, and I've made that point abundantly clear over the years. But I think that whenever somebody makes an attempt to fundamentally change a character that way, it's because there's always this desire by certain producers, and I put publishers, to force a false sense of relevancy, like public relevancy, with the character, and whereas the characters themselves maintain relevancy by maintaining that core. The reason why Captain America worked for the MCU is that even though they modernized and updated the character, the core from Steve Rogers was maintained, in the character. And I think the best interpretations of Superman, Superman and Lois, the TV series, is a perfect example of that. Yes, he doesn't have, red trunks. The suit is darker, but Superman is Superman. He remains a constant. His character and how he is presented remains a constant throughout that series. So, I'm looking forward to the new movie, and I'm really, again, my love for Superman as a character is well known. So, I vehemently defend, keeping the character, keeping the core of that character, in no matter what you decide, no matter what way you decide to reinterpret the concept. So,
Did you guys watch My Adventures with Superman?
Yes,
the
I did.
cartoon show?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's very
I love
new, very anime, very different, and yet it's the truest Superman I've seen on screen in 30 years.
I like it. Yeah, I like the show.
And to add to Jamal's point, as artists, we are aware of our own legend status. We put our names on our banners for a reason. It's become branding. It's become important to us because we have grown up seeing so many different artists, taking so many minor adjustments with the character over the years that we can't wait to have an opinion as well.
Right.
So if we get an idea where we take off the trunks or we put them in jeans, as Jamal says, you keep the core of what it is alive, so long as you go ahead and do this other things to make it more interesting. Because the point of this that we do is to make it familiar and new at the same time.
Right.
That's the only way you can keep Pulp Fiction alive. Because if you keep it exactly the way it's always been, it's going to eventually die a slow, painful death. And resurrecting will be impossible because what's left is the memory of what it was the entire time. So occasionally you're going to throw a little wrench into the works and try to, throw a little bit more, lighter fluid on the fire,
Superman Red and Blue.
Exactly. So we try to do things, and when you get that opportunity, you try to run with it. God forbid I put Superman in trunks
Right.
in Identity Crisis. That was a big problem. I got tired of seeing him in Speedos, man. Put him in, just put him in trunks. That makes sense to me. Maybe not, maybe I'm the wrong one, but that's just it.
Going for what you said, I don't know if you guys know. There was a famous Italian philosopher, Umberto Eco, a mathematician and philosopher, and he wrote an essay in 1969, translated in 1972, "The Myth of Superman." It's exactly about that. I mean, the essay itself has levels. It's about semiotics and stuff, but he talks about how the myth is really that successful because it keeps changing and keeps staying the same.
Right.
He's immutable, but he's always made relevant. It's a wonderful essay. So if you haven't read it, I recommend it. It's online. You can find it.
Yes, sir.
So along these lines, and you mentioned with the Supergirl, you're taking Supergirl, but you're getting from higher up pressure. How much are monthly sales impacting what's coming out? What the artists are doing, and are you guys looking at sales? Or forced to hear about sales?
I try not to look at sales right now, but at the time especially. There was some sales pressure, but one of the things that they don't tell you about our run at the time, as much crap as we were getting from, upstairs, Supergirl at the time was outselling both Action and Superman. So, we were clearly doing something that people were responding to, and we were getting a lot of press. General press from, the fact that I put a pair of bike shorts under Supergirl's skirt, to do exactly what Rags was saying before. It's like to, give the character some sense of dignity and give the character, because, for me, my first thought is she's 16, she's a 16-year-old girl. A lot of the teenagers that I know and knew at the time, they wear a skirt. They're putting full seated shorts underneath. That it just seemed like a logical thing to do, and it was a minor change. It started as a minor change, and then blew up because the colorist at the time, Nia Rufino, miscolored the shorts because they were supposed to be blue so that you wouldn't really notice. She colored them red in one issue, and then all hell broke loose. So, because people suddenly noticed that's what, even though I had been drawing the shorts underneath her skirt for 3 issues.
The shorts heard around the world.
The short, exactly. But my wife jokes that that's going to be on my tombstone. You put shorts on Supergirl. So
generally, they won't even tell you anything about numbers. If you look for it, you have to find it on your own.
Yeah.
Not easy to find.
I see.
Not anymore.
I see
Well, usually
DVDs
there used to be
of
at the end of the year you had that box that would give you the numbers of how many books were sold a month.
and because royalties rely on that, and if you're a good on their end, if you're a good talent, they want to keep you on there. They don't want you to look at your numbers and think, well, this book isn't going anywhere. I better go find something else. Conversely, we as artists and writers, we don't want them to be so suspiciously quiet about those numbers, because it's a big part of our income. We're looking for that one book that's going to, keep paying us. It's nice.
Once upon a time, you used to get some sort of royalty if you made over a certain number of books sold.
That's no longer the case.
So,
Not really.
so the last thing you don't want is to be blindsided with being pulled off a book.
Yeah.
Because we work at home. We're not in the meetings. We're not talking to our editors constantly, or the writer, or anybody really. We're just doing our job. So when you get that kind of news, it falls on what you did wrong.
Right.
It's never a collective effort. It's always you. Why was I pulled off this book? And so you start going through the whole history. It all adds up. It must be me. When it may not necessarily be so at all. So.
That gentleman.
Oh yeah, since there are a lot of reboots of Superman films that are all live action, there are a lot of animated, and there are a few live action shows Superman. There are a lot of animated shows Superman, and there are various animated movies that are only direct to video. And I wonder what are the possibilities that there could be a Supergirl and a there will be an animated movie, a beautiful movie that is a Superman that is animated, you know, a beautiful.
Oh, like a full length animated feature.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah, features, but not just a regular one. You know,
Right. So if I may start that off,
Yeah.
just from the historical perspective, Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse in 2018, that's not that long ago,
Right.
was the first ever action genre full-length theatrical release animated movie. Any kind, period. The first ever. That's how new this is. Isn't that shocking to think about?
That's
It's 2018, that's it. Everything else was Disney, comedy, whatever, but action, full-length theatrical release. Mask of the Phantasm doesn't count. That was a TV production
Right.
that got a limited theatrical release.
yeah.
So it's all so new.
Yeah.
Lord of the Rings,
Yeah.
right. But action, exactly. It's full length theatrical. That was the first. So
That's
yeah,
money,
right.
money has a really bad habit of pulling the same utterance when the cow's dead.
Yeah.
So before they'll actually entertain something different like that, like you said, 2018,
Right.
they have to exhaust everything first. So long as it doesn't cost too much money,
Yeah.
okay? Then they'll go ahead and entertain something new because now they've got nothing left.
Well, you also have to get over the initial hurdle. So you have Into the Spider-Verse. The first thing a producer is going to say is, "Can we make it exactly like Into the Spider-Verse?"
Right.
So so being able to do a feature-length live action or feature-length animated Superman movie, I know my first question as a creator would be, how do I not make it like Into the Spider-Verse? Because then you get accused of copying what somebody else has already done, even stylistically. And that takes, you know, a company, you know, in this case, Warner Brothers or the DCU Films, being willing to take the chance because animated features take so much longer to produce than live action. Being willing to take the chance to do something that may not be, you know, financially viable for them, you know, because there's, you know, animation isn't dying, but it's, you know, on life support in a lot of ways, especially feature animation. Unless you have already established brands. One of the things that Disney does well is they have a lot of established brands that they can play with.
Mhm.
But Into the Spider-Verse was a Sony production. It wasn't a Disney production. We have yet to see a full-length an animated Disney superhero film. We've seen live action because the MCU has already had this 15-year, now going on 17-year, almost 20-year track record of doing live action features. But we haven't crossed that Rubicon. Somebody needs to be able to take that next step. I don't know if it's going to be Warner Brothers. I don't know if it's going to be Disney.
Are you talking about like 2D animation or is it CGI animation? Because
You're not going to see a 2D. You're not going to see a 2D.
I mean, the only
yeah.
time you see 2D is like Creature Commando.
Yeah.
That's on.
But that's
TV.
television. That's
It's
not
a movie. Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Yeah. But again, Super Pet,
Which was good.
Yeah,
It
which
was
was
a good
good. But that's comedy. That's not a straight.
That's right.
It's a
full
comedy.
action.
It's not an action like a straight
It's not.
action.
The only thing I can think of is the top of my
Best
head.
one they made.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of on the top of my head
Mhm.
would have to be The Incredibles. It's probably the
Yeah, but you're
closest thing
talking.
to-
Which again is like,
That's
like
another
the
comedy.
closest thing.
yeah.
But that's also comedy. That's also Brad Bird, carrying
Yeah.
his resume
It's a
with him.
Pixar thing.
Yes.
And I want to add one more thing. The important thing to consider too is that he was saying Sony or Disney. Why does Disney not deal with Sony? And this is something that is one of the bugaboos for a lot of fans. Why is everything so different? Why are the origins fudged? Why are the costumes fudged? Why is the interaction different? Why is the sequence off? Why is it not canon? And it's because you have a Sony doing something. If you have one director, he's going to do it his way. You have another director, it's going to be his way. It's not ego, okay, as much as it is about selling
Right.
pillowcases, lunch boxes.
Yeah.
What can
You
we
know.
control
Yes.
in terms of merchandising and licensing?
Because there is always that battle between the publisher and the creator, especially if they've been long gone and you're dealing with their families of who owns what. So there's always about a line of demarcation that says, well, this is when Superman started to fly, therefore it's DC.
Right.
You know, the bounding superhero, that's Superman, that's you guys. And that never invariably becomes a new 52 or it becomes a new directing version,
Right.
another trilogy. And I'm telling you right now, I'm just going to say this. I'm going to say this loud and clear. Josh Trank's Fantastic Four, best one ever.
Wow, that's bold.
Whoa.
That's bold.
He's just looking for a fight.
I'm honoring today.
No, you and me outside. Man.
Let's go.
I would say The Incredibles is the best Fantastic Four.
No,
Yes.
No.
not even close.
No. Ghostbusters.
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 They
is
are
literally-
fantastic and they're four. But
No, Ghostbusters is
No.
literally a Fantastic Four movie.
No, the Beatles. And
you can't beat that, folks. So on that note, that's the end. That's
the
the top.
Fantastic Four.
Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more comic content. Check out these other videos for even more insight, and I'll see you at the next one. Excelsior.